This is the video for Wednesday, March 15th. The bell ringer for today: what is a resume and what is the purpose of a resume? So go ahead and answer that. You can use Google to answer it if you want. So a resume is a summary of your experiences and skills relevant to the field you are entering in. We're going to talk as this lesson goes on about specifically tailoring your resume to the position, but you don't want to have, at least once you get into applying for professional positions, you don't want to have one resume that you're just going to be able to send to anybody and everybody who wants a resume. You want to have it specifically tailored for the position that you are seeking. Right now, that might be a little bit different for you because the experience that you have is the experience that you have. But I have plenty of experience that won't fit on my resume. And if I'm applying for one job versus the other, I'm going to use different experience based on how relevant it is. So we'll talk about that later. So a resume is an accomplishment-driven marketing tool for individuals seeking employment. So when you think about marketing, you think about how a marketing tool is going to advertise the highlights and the best qualities of that specific item that you might be purchasing. It's the same thing in this case, right? In economics, you are able to sell your own labor, and that's exactly what's happening here. The person or company who's buying your labor presumably has a bunch of different options for whose labor to buy. And just like you have options as a consumer, you are able to choose which brand you want to buy and which product you think will work best for you. Well, it's the same thing for them. They get to decide which person to hire based on who they think is going to work best for them. And so having having an awesome resume makes you it works as a marketing tool for you in that. A resume relates your experiences to your career objective. So the last thing here is that it's important to be able to explain how your experiences work with this career that you're working for. So I have a resume that if I ever applied for law enforcement again, I'm going to use because it's going to highlight my law enforcement experience working in California. But if I'm applying for a different position at somewhere else as another teacher, I'm probably not going to use that because, as you'll see my resume in just a minute, I have plenty of teaching experience that will fit on there that it is more important and relevant to that specific job, right? So it's always going to be interesting to see which job you're applying for. So what is the purpose of a resume? The goal of any good resume is to show that you are a qualified candidate and a good match for the job. So you are going to do that by listing your skills and qualifications. That might be education, that might be employment, or it might be general skills that are helpful to that specific job. If that job requires you to know a certain computer program, you could talk about your experience in that. If it requires you to be personable and friendly, you could say that you're that. Whatever it is, it allows for the person who's reviewing the resume to say, "Oh, these are the skills we're looking for." And look, this person says that they have these skills. The resume motivates employers to interview you. So most employers spend 10 to 20 seconds scanning a resume, so you need to keep your resume to one page. This is very, very important. Most of the time when students send me a resume to look through, it is multiple pages because they think the more information they have on there, the better. And it's true, having more information can be better, but you need to do some creative editing because this is a marketing tool. You don't usually see a billboard that says, that takes more than one billboard. Maybe there's a certain advertising campaign that might do it that way, but generally speaking, the person who's reviewing your resume is only spending 10 to 20 seconds scanning a resume at the first glance, and that's deciding whether to put your resume in the pile of let's review it further or your resume in the pile of no, I think we're good. Now, most of these guidelines are from the days of when people would hand out physical resumes. And I've handed out physical resumes as recently as 4 years ago. But you also have to understand that now a lot of people, when they're applying for jobs, are applying to jobs in they're doing it virtually. And so you might think, well, it now doesn't matter so much if I have 2 pages. Well, it still does, because there's a rule of thumb in human resources that a resume needs to be kept to 1 page. And if a lot of times people are going to be looking at it and they're going to see, okay, well, if you don't keep your resume to 1 page, it means that you're not doing the research to realize that you should keep your resume to 1 page. So it's sort of a rule that you have to. So I have plenty of experience that does not go on my resume, and the reason is because it's just not going to fit. Okay, so here's a scan of my resume. Okay, I'll scroll in so we can look at it a little more closely in a minute. But you will notice that everything on my resume fits on 1 page. So there is no page 2. I have done plenty of things in my life, and I think I have plenty of skills that are not specifically here, that are that you're not going to see, because I want to tailor it to as specific of a job as I can. You will notice hopefully the first thing that you notice about my resume is you notice the red. Okay, I've got my last name in red. I've got these lines in red. It doesn't really do much. It doesn't really change much, but it makes my resume pop. It makes my resume stand out in a crowd of, if somebody gets 100 resumes, I want them to, at the very least, see, oh, okay, this one's a little bit different in a very subtle way. Now, I'm not doing it on pink paper, on construction paper. I'm not doing it on anything like that. I'm not putting pictures. I'm not doing anything that's going to make my resume seem unprofessional. This seems very professional. It's very subtle, but it still stands out in a certain way. You'll notice a left to right balance, how everything, I've got a category, a column of bullet points here and a column of bullet points here. You'll notice a left-right balance here, as we've got the title here, and then we've got the column over here of the dates, the column over here of the dates. You'll notice a top to bottom balance. Everything is fit into this one resume. And as I zoom in, you'll notice, okay, well, it looks like I've got these titles are a little bit darker. Okay, well, yeah, they are, and that's just because this writing is in grayscale. And so I've done that to make it pop. I've got this thing popping left to right, top to bottom, and just popping in terms of color. So I've got all of my, I've got a nice little professional summary here. I have my skills: strong written and verbal communicator, relationship-based approach to instruction. These are specifically things that are designed for if I was working, if I was applying for a teaching position, because right, like creative lesson planning, differentiated instruction, these are things that are, if I'm applying for a law enforcement job, no one's going to care about. Okay, and then I've got all my specific things over the last few years that have to do with education. I've got my education down here, the master's degree and the teaching credential, and the Bachelor of Arts degree. So I've got all this here, and this is all fitting in 1 page. I have plenty of things that would not fit on here, and that's okay. If they want more information, if they want references, notice I don't have any references. If they want references, they can ask me later. Okay, so this is what it looks like. A lot of people say that you shouldn't put your address on your resume. I don't think it really matters. Whether you put your address or not, I don't think it makes much of a difference. Okay, now this is my resume that I use if I'm ever using a resume for law enforcement. You will see I have a different list of skills here. This is for law enforcement: police patrol operations, community relations, law enforcement and crime prevention, search and seizure regulations, incident report writing, conversational Spanish. Now, those are obviously much different than my list of skills and abilities that I have here. Strong written and verbal communicator, relationship, like these are all very different. Okay, so that is going to be different. This is a specific thing that I wrote out. I applied for the Army Corps of Engineers, which is to work as a park ranger for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at Lake Hartwell. Now, I didn't get this job. That's fine. Most of the jobs that you apply for, you're not going to get. So, but I wrote this out specifically for that. And then if you look at my work history, is going to include much of the same stuff. But and obviously I have to include my most recent because I don't want them to think that I have an employment history gap since 2014. So I have to include this. But then I talk about what I did at the police department. And on this one, I never talked about that because it's not important, right? I mean, it's great. A lot of times I'll mention it when I interviewed for this job that I have now. I told Mr. Warren that I used to work in the police department, but I didn't fit it on here because I just didn't have room, right? I had substitute teacher, I had opportunity class teacher, long-term substitute teacher, football coach. I had all these things. I was also working with the marching band. Like I had all these things that wouldn't necessarily fit. And so I had to make sure that I got that part done first. Okay, so so you need to know yourself and know the position, right? So these are going to be our next two categories here. So you need to ask yourself, how can I target my resume to the company I am applying for? One very specific way to do that is changing all those things that I showed you. Changing specifically, in one, I don't talk about the law enforcement experience, and in the other, I do. But then another way is I'm actually looking for a challenging and rewarding summer employment working as a park ranger for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, right? Hopefully when they see that, if they're reading it, and remember, they don't always read it. Usually they just scan it. They will see, okay, he took the time and effort to make a specific resume for this particular job, instead of just, talking about how I'm an educator who works in public education and what I'm good at in education. Next, prepare an inventory of your skills, accomplishment, education, and experience. So this that's what this is. This is an inventory. These are my skills, my background, my education. Right? These are all the things that are going to make somebody realize that I might be a good fit for their company. And then you need to know the position. Do your research and tailor your resume to the position you are applying for. Following is a list of skills you should know. The necessary skills, desired qualifications, required education and work experience, the key values, and job duties. You can always, if you're applying for a specific job, you do want to know exactly what they're looking for so that you can make yourself as appealing to that person or position as humanly possible. And hopefully you've seen on my resume how I did that with two different ways. So look at your own resume, figure out, does your resume work in that way? Resumes generally are not meant to be just passed out, right? The days of walking downtown with a stack of printed resumes and handing them to each business, that's not the way things are done anymore. If you want to do that at your age, you probably could, specifically because your resumes are going to be very generic. You're not going to have a lot of specific experience with things. But once you get into the real world, once you start applying for jobs that have to do with your career, entry-level jobs after college, things like that, you're going to do much better when you tailor your resume. And so I have a general resume on a Word document that I go in and I change, and I change all these different things about that resume before I send it anywhere. Okay, and so that's the best resume advice that I have. So what I would do is I would look at your resume that you have now and try to limit it to one page, try to get your most relevant things just for whatever jobs you might be applying for, and have it ready to go so that you can make those changes if you need to apply for something quickly. Because you never know when someone's going to say, hey, I've got a great summer opportunity, send me a resume, and they want it right then, and you don't have time to sit down and do a resume, and that job's going to go quick. You never know when someone's going to want to scan through a resume on your phone. Maybe you just run into somebody who's got a great opportunity for you. So I would have a PDF version copy of my resume on my phone that they can just scroll through and look at. Okay. That's obviously not going to be nearly as tailored as I'm going to want it to be for you, but you can still have something and be prepared, because having something is better than having nothing in that case.